Hello and welcome to this demonstration of a slightly unusual reel-to-reel tape recorder, the Philips EL3516G/57. Many of you will probably recognize this general style of recorder. This chassis was launched by Philips in the late 50s, middle to late 50s, and was really Philips's first serious attempt at a home recorder, with fully featured home recorder. This chassis features three different speeds here, 1 7/8, 3 3/4, 7.5 inches per second, and a power off button. It features fast wind in both directions using push buttons, a pause function, record, playback, tone control, volume control, and recording volume for microphone and line, I believe. And of course a tape counter at the very top there. Normally in these videos I try to demonstrate the functionality of the machine, but the basic functionality of this is quite simple, and there's probably going to be other videos doing that. So I'm going to have a closer look at this particular machine. First of all, the EL3516 is at least as far as I'm concerned, was the first Philips recorder to use this type of chassis. But normally it doesn't have this classic styling. This is the late 50s styling with two-tone gray and gold-colored trim. And this speaker that has sharp edges at the corner and at the top and rounded corners at the bottom. And also this machine has here an EM84 indicator tube. I'll switch the machine here on here and you will see how it lights up. And the actual tube is very far down in the machine actually, and here it comes. You can see the green light coming on here. The actual tube, if we just angle the camera here, you can see that the tube is actually far down, and then there's this plastic light conductor that conducts the light up. And this arrangement with the EM84 here, and knobs on the left and right hand side, was actually, as far as I was concerned, reserved for a Philips machine that I've only seen in Germany, so I believe it was only marketed in Germany, called the EL3522. So the question is, what is this? Why have they called it the EL3516 when it doesn't seem to be classic EL3516? But we'll go on. We'll have a closer look at the insides. First, we'll take the knobs off, and then take this one off too. It's slightly hard to remove. And we'll take the head cover off. This plastic thing, this plastic mask, as it were, off. And finally, this metal top plate, and that reveals the actual machine. Now, this looks looks like a fairly standard EL3516. This chassis is called the EL16 chassis, and basically what we have here, if we look carefully, we have a capstan here that's turning, and you can see the flywheel here. The flywheel is in turn powered via one of three intermediate pucks here. The top one is for the lowest speed, and there are two more further down for the two highest speeds. Then there's a drive belt, which in this machine, I believe, is the original one. And the reason for that is this tensioning roller over here. When the machine is powered off, it's in this position. If I power the machine on, there's a wire that runs here underneath the tape, the magnetic heads, and it actually tensions the belt when I press the power on switch. And that means that the belt is actually not specially tensioned at this point, and that, I believe, is the reason that the belt has lasted so long on this particular model. The reason I mention this is that in later versions, later machines using this chassis, they didn't actually have that mechanism. The belt is always under tension, and probably they figured that this was a bit of a luxury, it didn't actually add that much or something. I don't know what the reason was, but at least it was removed in later versions. Probably it wasn't worth the effort, quite simply. The brake here is also standard on the EL3516, but it's also different from the EL3542, so I'll mention that here. We have this lever here, or this rod that moves forward when I press the stop button. If I press the stop button, the lever moves forward. But looking carefully here, it actually just engages a spring. Then the spring is in turn connected to these two brake arms. There's a fulcrum here and one here. So when I press the stop button, it actually the brakes engage. This one here on the left has a fairly large felt pad. This one here has a fairly small one, and there's also a rubber flipper, for want of a better word, which goes in different directions depending on which way the reel is turning, and I believe that's because you want the supply reel, no matter which direction the machine is moving, to go at to have a higher braking force. And by having this flap, this rubber flipper flap over when you're going in this direction, you get that effect. So far we have a standard EL3516, but when I started looking at this more closely, I realized that this input jack here, this is the microphone input, and it's actually a 1/4-inch jack, which is unusual, at least for European machines. It would have been very common in America. Philips tended to use DIN connectors, especially on this version, or these machines. Sometimes they used banana plugs during the 1950s, then they slowly switched to DIN connectors at the end of the 50s and early 60s. Now looking at the input-output connectors here on the side, they're also 1/4-inch jacks. Here, and this one is a phono connector. That would be very typical for an American machine, but not a European one. So that had me slightly confused. First I thought this might be a machine that someone had bought in America and then imported back to Europe or something, but looking at the safety markings, the fact that it's designed for 50 Hertz indicates that it's actually a machine that's designed for the European market. But the final clue to what this really is, it came from if we try to zoom in here, if we try to look at the recording heads, and I'm going to try and zoom in here. There are two heads in this machine. There's an erase head, which you'll see here, the white one, the whitish head here with just one set of laminations. That's the erase head. It's a half-track mono erase head. And then we've got the recording playback head, which is over here. And that actually has two sets of laminations with a shield in between. And when I saw that, I began to put two and two together and realized that this is actually a machine that can play back stereo tapes recorded in 2-track technology. Now that's not too bad an idea, but it was fairly rare. I should explain a bit more. In the 1950s, late 1950s, 4-track machines became common. 4-tracks enables you to put a stereo recording on each side of the tape or two mono recordings. And so a lot of mono machines were sold with a stereo capability. The stereo capability usually just involved pulling out a wire or connector to one half of the head, and the other half was played back using the internal amplifier, and you have to use an extra amplifier to play back the other channel. But in this case, with a 2-track head, normally a mono head would only have one set of laminations, only for the top track, the top half, an ordinary track. This one has two, which means that this can actually play back stereo. And not only that, it actually has a complete, not a complete, but it has a playback amplifier for the right-hand channel. The ordinary amplifier in this machine consists of an EF86 input pentode, a double triode, the ECC83, very typical for tape recorders, and then an ECL82 output amplifier, or output pentode, I should say. But there's also an extra EF86 and ECC83 in this machine mounted on a separate chassis, which is intended to amplify the output from the right-hand channel, the lower channel on the tape. I've actually tried to use these outputs, listen to them, and this output here is called output 1. That just outputs, it's a low-level output of the same signal that goes out through the loudspeaker. You can connect an extra speaker here, incidentally. Then there are two outputs called output 2 and output 3, and they can actually seem to output the same thing, at least when listening using a mono 1/4-inch cable. I believe that they are actually, one of them is probably a stereo connector, so you can get both left and right through the same connector. I haven't tried that, though. I don't have the schematics for it. As this is a demonstration video, I'm going to do a quick demonstration of the basic mono functionality of this machine. To do that, we need to power it on. Press this knob here, button here, and now with the stop button depressed, the reels are still. If I release that, the felt clutches underneath the reels cause them to start spinning in each direction. I don't know if that's a feature or just an accidental function of not depressing the stop button properly. I'm not sure. Anyway, we'll put a reel on here, a full reel of tape, and then we'll take an empty reel and place on this spool carrier, and then we'll thread the tape. It's a bit awkward because I'm not left-handed, so it's going to be a bit of a bit tricky here. And then we're going to thread the right-hand reel like this. Press forward to wind the tape a bit. Now the clutches underneath, the fast wind clutches are worn. They're made of neoprene rubber, and they tend to wear out on these machines and deteriorate over the years. Now, one problem with this machine is this here shaft, potentiometer shaft. It just spins and spins and spins. There's no end stop. I believe the potentiometer is broken somehow. So if we try to play something, it's a bit of hit and miss to try to get a signal off the tape. Here we go. So there we have it. It actually works, and I believe that this machine has probably not been done anything for it since it was built in 1958 or whatever. So here we have it, a working example of a machine from 1958. Now, this is a mono tape. I'm not attempting to do the stereo playback thing, as it probably wouldn't come across too well on YouTube anyway. But I'm trying to demonstrate this machine, the basic functionality of it anyway. Fast wind backwards actually works quite well, probably due to the fact that just by chance the clutches on the left-hand reel or spool carrier are actually much better. So there we have it, the EL3516G/57 Philips tape recorder, 2-track, mono, but can play back stereo tapes. I believe that this machine now this is pure speculation, but I believe this machine was actually designed for the American market, hence the 1/4-inch inputs and outputs, but that Philips saw some sort of a market for it in Europe and decided that they wouldn't redesign the machine for European conditions. They just offer it with a 50 Hertz motor and try to sell it the way it was. Now, one has to remember that in those days, stereo was very much an experiment. People weren't really sure what to do with it. Stereo records were being launched, there wasn't any stereo radio, and one big market was envisaged to be pre-recorded tapes. Now, that didn't really happen to the extent that was expected, but I believe that's why this machine was designed the way it was, that people would buy stereo tapes, listen to them on the machine, but they could also use it as a standard mono recorder for recording off from a microphone or from the radio or whatever. So there we have it, the Philips EL3516G/47 from around 1958. Okay, thank you for watching, and see you later. Bye.